There we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Uxcel live webinar. My name is Sofia. I'm Uxcel's community manager and your host for today. This webinar is a part of our free webinar series where each month we bring you an industry expert from around the world to help you level up your UX product and AI skills. This session is all about product design. Where is it heading? What skills will matter in 2026? And what you should focus your time and effort in. So if you're thinking about your next role, maybe promotion, or basically just how to stay competitive, this session is for you. And hopefully it will help you decide where to focus your time and energy. For this topic, we have Filippos Protogeridis. He is a head of product design at Voi and founder of Designary. With 15 years of experience, Filippos has hired, grown, and mentored designers across different stages of their careers. And with Designary, he creates learning material for product designers. And you can always see his great bits and pieces of content on LinkedIn. Also joining him here is Gene. He is a designer turned founder and CEO of Uxcel. Gene spent years building learning materials, tools for designers and product teams. And his focus is really on skills that translate into career growth. So welcome. How are you doing? And how are you feeling about today's topic?
Really well. Thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be among so many people and joining you, Sophia and Gene. So yeah, very excited for today. Really looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Sophia, for introduction, and Philippe is super excited to have you here today and have a little chat about the career, the product design career. That's my personal background and experience as well. So I think we can have some good conversation here, which hopefully can inspire a few folks.
Definitely. And before we jump in, I just wanted to give a quick note to everyone who is joining us that this is a live session. So feel free to say hi. I see a lot of you are already letting us know where you're tuning in from, which is great. But you can also tell us what is the one skill you are working on right now. As this is a live session, we love to wrap it up with the Q&A at the very end. We will have around 10 to 15 minutes. Stay tuned, but also if you have any questions even during the session, feel free to post it and we will try our best to get to it. Hopefully everything is working well on both sides of the live stream, but if there are any issues, of course, let us know. And without further ado, I would love to get straight into it. So to start, Filippos, could you please walk us through your career journey and how you got into product design?
Sure thing. I love saying that story. I think it's a good one. So yeah, my family was basically in advertising, right? So I grew up my whole life around very creative people. My dad was an incredible art director who did everything by hand, with papers and stencils and all that sort of thing. My brother was a photographer. My cousin was in stage design. And then I think at some point I was 12 years old, my brother showed me Photoshop and he showed me how to take a photo of my mother and turn her eyebrow into a mustache. And that was just mind-blowing to me. I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen in my life. So yeah, I think ever since then, the world of Photoshop was what got me into design. I started tinkering with, photo manipulation and just some basic graphic design, got into some forums for graphic and visual design. And that was where I got most of my inspiration, early skills. And that was still a hobby though. That wasn't anything like a career or profession. So later on, I got into computer science. I studied engineering. And I think back then I didn't realize how big of a combo existed out there in combining engineering and creativity and design. But then once I got out of uni, I just realized there was a world out there called UX, which combined two of my favorite things, which was, the system thinking and the logic and building from my CS studies with the creativity, the aesthetics, that general communication approach of design. and the rest is history. And yeah, 15 years later, that's where we're at and what we're doing.
Awesome. Yeah, that's actually a really great story. I have something to add. I think like engineering and design is very very great pairing. I'm just being from myself. I'm myself as well engineer by education. I went through the computer science classes too, and exactly this kind of similar way. I discovered the Photoshop. I started with the Photoshop with some some online, not online courses. I ordered some CD back then, with some
Same.
guy was just teaching Photoshop. But there was nothing out there, right? I think my first version of Photoshop was CS 3 or 4.
Oh wow, that's yeah. You're more of a veteran than I am. Yeah.
Yeah, old school, old school. But even back then in Photoshop, I remember, applying the engineering background, building some little automations, especially when you started working with the assets exporting for the iPhone. Everything need to be cropped down. It's not like now. It's
Totally.
super easy, right?
Oh yeah, I
Those days.
remember spending weeks just figuring out how to export assets for Android and iOS back when
Oh
mobile
yeah.
design was a thing. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, funny story actually from my end. My very first project on Freelancer. I went to the freelance to explore my career, to start my career, and the very very first project was iOS design, and I did it in Photoshop, obviously. And I spent the whole night trying to do it perfectly. I delivered design. The guy liked it, loved it, and the next message he sent to me was like, "Hey, do you have the Retina graphics?" And I was like, what? And I'm going googling what is retina, and I did it. It was my very very first lesson on the Photoshop, that you need to start working with the vector shapes, not with the
On the
raster.
highest size or
Yes.
with vector. Yeah. Oh my
Because the
god.
next night I spent redoing all the stuff in the vector so that I can deliver the retina graphics. But yeah, a little anecdote.
I know. I just remember when the switch happened from Photoshop to
Hmm.
Sketch, and how suddenly, Sketch was like, you can design in 1x and you don't have
Oh
to
yeah.
think about this. And I was like, oh my, oh
Yes.
my God, that
Yes.
just cut down my workload by, 1/5 or 1/6. It's
Exactly.
crazy,
Exactly.
yeah, how designing in Photoshop used to be back
Yeah.
in the day, showing the interaction with like different layers, hiding the hover state or the
Oh
active state
yeah.
of a button.
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy, crazy.
I even did GIFs in Photoshop back then, like little GIF animations. It was interesting, definitely. But so you basically are self-taught, right? So you studied computer science,
Totally.
right? So how was your self-taught path was? Like where did you, studied? How did you got your first maybe, job or freelance gig? Like what was
Yeah,
the journey?
to be honest, it's been a very chaotic journey. I would never recommend to someone to follow the same path as I did back then. I think most of my UX knowledge generally came from UX Stack Exchange and the
Hmm.
Nielsen Norman group. I
Oh
think
wow.
back then
Yeah.
those were the two big places on the internet you would go to
Yeah.
figure out what UX is. So literally, it was like, oh, should this button be on the left or on the right? Let me go on
Mm,
UX Stack Exchange and ask a question, or see if other people have asked that question. Let me see if there's any article in it. And
mm,
literally back then, I think there was nothing. It was literally just the NN group. So I think that was a big source of trial and error. That it was definitely a very chaotic path that took me years and
mm,
years of just failing and doing things wrong, and then asking myself, why does this not feel right, and
yeah.
why does it not feel like a polished product. I think the more I then started exploring kind of different, widely popular design languages, like Apple's
Hmm.
human interface guidelines. Material wasn't a thing back then, so it was much later on. I think that was kind of a first, a touch point with an actual design language and what that means
Mm,
for the experience of the end user. So honestly, it was a bit of trial and error, a bit of broken comms, and finding information in different places and asking around. Mentoring was also really difficult back then.
mm,
I was also based in Greece back then. Greece was a really funny place. The good designers of, when I was a junior designer, weren't sharing anything about how they were doing their job. So it was basically going in blind. So yeah, it was a lot of trial and error. And I think to
mm,
to your second point, which was, how I got my first job, I honestly just I was just I just had this drive and this passion to do
mhm,
this and just design interesting things and great things. And just from pure networking and putting myself out there and sharing my work, even though that work was terrible, I just managed to find this one person that believed in me, because up until that point, I only had graphic design jobs, right? That was how I started as a
Same,
hobbyist.
same.
Yeah, but I found this one person and he said, "What do you do?" And I was like, "Look, I studied CS, so I can code a bit. I know
Mhm.
Photoshop, so I can design a bit." And he was like, "Oh, we're looking for someone just like yourself. Do you want to do whatever you were doing before, and come do it for our startup?"
Yeah.
And I started my first job at a startup based in Greece, and that's when my career actually started.
Nice, nice. I mean, I think like the best experience and the best career actually probably starts something like that, not like from the clear path. And I would probably assume that's why you actually started Designary, because you had this pain and you wanted to give a proper path, right, for the folks to learn design. Exactly the same for Uxcel. We've taken different approaches, of course, but that's kind of exactly the intent, because I share a lot of commonalities from what I heard from you. Started with a graphic design, Photoshop. I was designing posters for some parties. That was my
Oh,
very,
same
very
here. Maybe that's how
yeah.
we all started in the end. Yeah, we do.
Yeah, exactly, because nobody shared, like there is no LinkedIn, there is no Instagram, nobody shared any of their work, how do you work. The same, the Newsonomer group was the biggest source of truth for me, but again, you still need to basically manually search it and etc. There was no AI to kind of, hey, can you scan this number group and give me what they think about the buttons, right? So yeah, I think like a lot of commonalities, because like I started with the freelance. I wasn't starting with a startup. I started with freelance, and just hunting gigs and marketing myself. It was very, very big thing there, because like you fighting for the jobs, and the same, like all the experience and the best practices, etc., just came from the practice. I I think like I completed like 70 little small to medium sized projects over the like course of 2 or 3 years, and it was insane. It's like 12 hours a day, just practice, 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 and you study along the way. Like you said, hey, how do I need to place those buttons? You go and try to figure out the best practice. So I think that's great, and I think the lesson here for the audience is the practice. I would say matters a lot, and you develop a lot of core skills and craft and the confidence. I would say, right, with basically just going and doing.
Totally. And I love what you're saying, because I think it's one of the things that today is very unclear. You have AI and you have so many great tools that kind of do the majority of the work for you, right? And I think if you're someone that's a junior person, you might be thinking, okay, hey, I'll learn the fast way. But the problem with learning
Yeah.
the fast way only is you can't really develop taste, you can't really develop intuition, you can't really develop
Yeah.
the basic skills.
Yeah.
And yeah, what you were saying before, I resonate so much with it, because I've put in so much time in design. I've designed so many things I can't even remember them. Sometimes I go back to my old work folders and I look at them and I'm like, I genuinely can't remember designing this. But it's because I did so many things wrong, and so many different clients and freelancing and startup design and enterprise design, that I just built really good intuition
Yeah.
in working in all of those sorts of things. And I think you touch on freelancing, and I think it's very interesting, because freelancing gave me such a big part of who I am today. Even
Hmm.
though I didn't start as a freelancer, I did a lot of freelancing kind of like halfway through my career. So
Hmm.
after a few startup gigs, I then took on freelance, because I just wanted to explore more, and I wanted to work with people outside of Greece, and I wanted to work with international teams.
Yeah.
And I did so much freelancing, and because I worked with B2B, B2C, mobile apps, web apps, really complex apps,
Yeah.
really simple apps, high craft, no attention to craft. It was a constant lesson. And
Hmm.
I think it's a thing that many people are missing today, just because there is a path and there are courses, and there is education online. I think that is one bit, but nothing replaces just putting those hours. There's that saying, you need to put
Hmm.
10,000 hours into something to truly
Yeah.
master it. It's very true till this day, and it's really hard to do this when everyone's like, I'm going to turn you into superstar designer in 2 hours, by
Yeah.
taking
Yeah.
uh, this thing.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I cannot agree more. And I think I would argue that those 10,000 hours and those, numbers of projects that you put in, myself as well, I put in, I would, looking back and reflecting on what happened, because I'm not that's super close to design right now. I had some time to reflect. Uh, I think that what developed your, uniqueness, your skill set, the thing you like, because the advantage of following the path, yeah, it is faster, but it is some sort of average, and you kind of you get in the course skills, etc. But once you go in and doing this guerrilla way, I think that's what gave you like you said, like the small projects, the mobile projects, the SaaS, the everything. I think like very similar situation was on my end, bit probably more on mobile, but yeah, it kind of gave you opportunity to explore. Okay, this thing I like, this thing I don't like, this is what what I cannot stop thinking about and like keep developing. And I think this is like the little signs you've been following along your path that led you through to your job. I think this is actually beautiful, and uh, yeah, I would argue like everybody should try to get some kind of experience like that.
I would agree. I would agree. I think it's very funny because when I meet many designers nowadays that have come through a more, let's say, structured education approach,
Hmm.
they've studied product design or UX design, or they've taken some great online courses, but they haven't really practiced it too much, right? And as
Yeah,
soon as you give them something that maybe goes a bit out of their comfort zone, they're like, oh, I can't design a
yeah,
landing page. Oh, I can't do a mobile app. I've only done web apps. And for me, that's what freelancing gave me early on, because it was like, there's no, you won't say no to new work, right? You won't say no to a client. You're like, are
yeah.
you good at mobile apps? Of course I'm good at mobile apps. What do you mean? So you go in and you study all the,
Yeah, it's your
HIGs
first
and
app.
app.
It's your first app, but of course I'm good at mobile apps, right?
Exactly, exactly. So I think there is a lesson there that I think, especially early on in your career, and you said something that I really liked. I think you need to explore and go broad, because it's the only time in your career where you can go broad,
Yeah.
like with no judgment, no nothing. Later in your career, as you become more senior, like lead staff level, people will start seeing like, oh, are you good at this? Are you,
Hmm.
specializing? Are you niching in on something? And I sometimes talk about this. It's actually quite hard for many people to, let's say,
Hmm.
if they've been for 5, 6 years in B2B or in consumer, they actually can't easily jump to a different thing. But early
Hmm.
on in your career, or especially when you're freelancing, you can pretty much do whatever you
Yeah.
want. And it's good to just explore a lot, see what you enjoy and who you want to be as a designer, right? And what are
Yeah.
you good at? What do you enjoy doing? What gives you stimulation? And then decide, okay, now I can specialize.
Yeah.
And I think that this broad exploration and familiarity and friction with everything also makes you extremely powerful as a designer, because instead of only
Absolutely.
being able to do something very, very narrow, you can actually be what we would call a generalist, let's say. And
Yeah.
I love design generalists, right? Many companies don't. Many companies will favor specialists.
Hmm.
I love design generalists. I love people that are very happy to take on anything, as long as they're solving interesting
Yeah.
problems, they have a high sense of like craft. So I think, yeah, early on, just go broad, maybe try a bit of freelancing, especially if you're looking for a job and you want to do it on the side, because it's such a great lesson and it just gives you a chance to work on many different things that will
Yeah.
all be a great learning experience.
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree with that 100%. I think like how I think about, the going broad is you building the foundation. It's like building a house. You need to build a proper foundation, wide enough, strong enough. You don't need to go like, you don't build a high foundation, right? You build just enough so everything stands on it, and then you can build a tower or whatever tower, which is your specialization, right? If you want to, or you can, continue building up. Probably gonna take you more. I think for the generalist, there is one note from my end. It's probably going to be taking you a little bit more time to get there to the
Totally.
because you need to kind of look at more things. So the specialist path is, if you found your passion, and I think this is very important, because I don't think you can become very good specialist without being passionate about the thing. But if you found this passion, there's definitely going to be faster one. But yeah, there is the trade-offs. Like the generalist can think broader, and yeah, awesome. All right, so Filippos, let's get to the topic of 2026. So looking at the next year, like from your perspective, which skills do you think will make the biggest difference for product designers, and maybe why?
Yeah, sure. I think it's a great question. I'll tell you my opinion. I have some controversial takes, and I have some takes that I think many people would agree with. So
Hmm.
one thing is, look, I'm a designer that's very passionate about the craft, like extremely passionate, and the whole industry has been talking about craft in recent years. I think there's many different interpretations of craft. Ultimately, for me, craft means having great taste, knowing what's good and what's bad, having a good sense of like polish in
Yeah.
the interfaces you're creating and the experiences, not just the interface really, but the experience as a whole and how refined that feels,
Hmm.
and having intentionality, knowing that if you're trying to solve a problem in a specific way, I'll use visual elements and animation and interaction patterns in a specific way because those are going to achieve, a really kind of impactful result. It
Hmm.
will solve the problem. It will create delight. It will alleviate any pains and confusion. So craft, everyone talks about it. I think the reason why I'm very bullish on craft is because what we're seeing now in the industry is everything is becoming more automated, right? It's
Yeah.
very easy to get an average result. You can use any AI product out there, any
Yep.
LLM, and it's going to produce a pretty good result. Like I'm saying
Hmm.
average, but it's actually more than good. And this is only going to get better. So where can design shine in an age where, a person going into the industry can produce something average or even good? Design shines where you can see that difference with someone that
Hmm.
has intentionality in their approach, a very high level of craft. And maybe, they're using AI tools. I'm not saying you have to do every single thing by yourself, but
Yeah.
having that ability to separate a product that is really polished to a product that, could have been AI generated,
Yeah.
I think is really key. And this is also why we're seeing many, let's say, craft focused designers now rising into those staff and senior staff and super IC roles, as people call them. And the industry wants more and more of those people, because what happened, 5 or 6 years ago is you had a lot more design positions, right?
Hmm.
There were a lot more designers and bigger design teams and companies. So you could afford to have maybe some people that weren't as strong in craft. Maybe you had some generalists, some specialists, some people that were stronger in different areas. What's happening now is a big consolidation, right?
Yep.
You can't afford to have good visual designers and good people at kind of like interaction design, but
Hmm.
no good visuals, or good people in prototyping, but not kind of like foundational design. So craft for me is really, really important. Is how you stand out. It's how you can be better than AI
Hmm.
at design. And it's also how you can build really, really memorable experiences.
Yeah.
Um, the second thing is, and I've kind of alluded to it before, right? I was talking about, the freelancing, and Gene, you also talked about your early years, and I think
Yeah.
something that is really missing in this industry, especially because of kind of how education is portrayed in this industry and what's happening with all the boot camps and all the courses,
Hmm.
is, people have this kind of mindset that I'm going to go into a company, it's going to have the perfect process. I'm just going to have to be a small part of that process. And
Yeah.
that's what I need to do. And, I often talk about this notion of, always thinking of yourself as a founding designer. If you were to join a startup that's 5 people and you were the only designer, and they had no
Hmm.
research team, they had no copywriters, they had no kind of production studio, which is all the things that I benefit from nowadays. But like, if I
Hmm.
didn't have all of those things, what would you do? And I think having the ability to act like a founding designer, to have this
Hmm.
sense of ownership and autonomy, and being able to, work with a small or a large team, but have this entrepreneurial mindset. I
Yeah.
think this is something that, yes, if you're joining a big company, it won't really make a big difference. But if you're joining smaller companies, and generally the market is now much bigger for smaller
Hmm.
companies with all the redundancies and layoffs, I think this is a skill that really sets you apart. And after having hired and interviewed so many people, I can tell you that this is one of the things that immediately stands out in the first interview. It's not
Yeah.
a thing that you can, separate in someone's portfolio, but as soon as you enter like a conversation with someone and you see that, founding designer
Hmm.
attitude, I'm like, this is someone special. Let me find a way to bring them to my
Yeah.
team, just because it's probably 1 out of 100 people that is like
Yeah.
that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. You said it extremely well. I think I was thinking kind of similar, and I'm thinking similar about the craft and all these AI advancements. And we can touch this topic about the AI a bit later too. But yeah, AI empowers a lot, but also you will see a lot of more kind of average products, and the craft will help you stand out. So you basically lean into your strength as designer, and I think it is very important. And also adding to you kind of my personal thoughts as, like, working the last almost 6 years as a founder, is, and also having the engineering background, and like you said, being a founding designer, I think like the important piece from my side, the advice would be also develop the cross-functional skills, so you can communicate with the product managers, you can communicate with data analytics, etc. Like, if you are a designer who can open the Amplitude or Google Analytics or whatever analytics, and just quickly grasp like some bullet points. It's not too hard to learn, but even this little thing will give you so much advantage into making your decisions. The same goes to the product management, the same goes to engineering. You cannot I cannot, stress enough how much time and how efficient was my communication with development teams when I was in my last corporate job before starting Uxcel. I was able to manage, like, I think like 5 development teams. We had, like, very little design resources, as all companies do, most of them. Uh, but like, being able to speak with them in their language, empowers you a lot. And I think with the development of AI, and with companies obviously going to be restructuring teams in the next years, like, I think it's still in process. Nobody knows probably how it's going to be shaped, so I don't think anybody will have an answer here. But I do believe that, yes, I agree with craft mentioned, because that's the strength of the designer. You need to double down on that, and then empower yourself with at least this foundational level of cross-functional skills, so that you can be embedded. I would say you will be able to be embedded in any process, either it's a small company or larger one. So yeah, awesome. Yeah, I think this is a very good point here.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more, right? I think this ability, to me, it's twofold. It's one, being able to work with different disciplines and
Mhm.
learn from those different disciplines. Like, as you work with good PMs, try wear a PM hat yourself and figure out, like, what are they doing and how are they prioritizing and how are they sizing a business or a product opportunity.
Yeah.
If you're working with PMs that are strong in data, like, that's how I learned, to use data. I just worked with people that were very strong at data. So I thought, tell me about this. Like, tell me, how are you interpreting this funnel or this
Yeah.
discrepancy here? And through that constant friction, I just became pretty good at it. I worked with people that were great in research, and research I only started doing properly, 3-4 years in my
Mhm.
career. But then as soon as I had someone that I was like, oh, this person is doing it really well, he's asking the right questions, he's using the right tools, I just shadowed people a lot and I learned. And I think it's something that, we don't see as much nowadays because everything is straightforward. Like, you need to tick
Yeah.
these 5 boxes and you're a great designer. But it's like just developing this cross-functional, discipline and
Mhm.
communication skills. I think A is very useful to any company. Everyone will favor someone that is really good at working with people. B, it's going to give you such great skills that go out of your comfort zone, out of your bubble. And it's something I often post about. Like, the best designers are the ones that don't think in their own bubble. Like, they don't think,
Yeah.
I'll create something that is great for designers. They'll think, I'll create something that is great for the engineers in my team, the PM in my team, the marketers in my team, our
Yep.
legal department, our experts, because they think of that wider bubble. And I
Yep.
think the more you do this, the more it changes you and it shapes you as a person, and the better of a designer you can be, because you
Yeah.
have this very broad kind of like exposure.
Exactly, exactly. 100%, 100%. That's like product. Product is not this little thing. Product is the whole thing. Experience, that's the whole thing. And I think this the mindset. The designers need to apply more and more, I would say. All right. So we talked about like the skills which will matter in next year, and let's flip it a bit. So what do you think? Which skill you think? Designers who obsess about the skill maybe today, which skill won't matter next year that much.
Yeah, I have a controversial take on this. I've
Hmm.
I've 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 been in many debates about this. I would call out two things: obsession with the process and obsession with tools.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you why. I think process is a very interesting one. I love process, right? I'm a very process oriented person. I'm sure you studied
Oh yeah.
engineering, Gene. You must be very process oriented,
Oh
right?
yes.
It comes with the trade. But I think there is an obsession with a process in the design and UX community, and I think
Hmm.
process works really well exactly when you have big teams. They need to follow the same rules, they need to follow the same process. And I think if you're a company of more than 1,000, 2,000 people, process will definitely have a positive ROI. So I'm not saying, don't do process, like
Yeah.
chaos is better. But I think especially in smaller businesses, or startups, scale ups, mid-sized businesses, or if you're not joining like a FANG or so, having this obsession with a process, I think, is one of the most detrimental factors in a
Hmm.
designer's growth. And what I tend to see is we have plenty of people in the industry that, because they were taught a specific process at a boot camp or at a course again, and they got so kind of immersed in that process. And by the way, that process is great. Like, it's great to
Hmm.
do workshops and follow the design thinking method or double diamond again and again, but you can really see this obsession in some people. And as soon as you break something about the process, they're like, oh, we can't launch this without testing this. But like, well, that's a business priority P0, right? So it
Yeah. Yeah.
does just needs to go out today. Or oh, I don't have like a proper PRD for this, so I can't start working on it. And in my early years, I would just create the PRD. I wouldn't
Yeah.
wait for someone to give me the requirements. So I think there's definitely people that would disagree with this, but in my
Mm.
opinion, being less focused on the process, creating process, being able to create process where process is a gap, but also being open to slightly less process and just getting some value out and building great
Yeah.
experiences, no matter what that looks like in the
Yeah. Yeah.
background. I think that's really key. And the reason why I think this is so important, it's the one thing I called out, is because, especially because of AI and because of the speed at which teams are building now, I think that process will change. I don't think teams can afford nowadays to say,
100%.
we're going to follow every single step and we're going to do it all the time, right? It's just not the new reality. That's the old reality. And I think the more people are flexible and adaptable and know when to focus on process where process is like high ROI, and know when to say, you know what, I'm okay to like flip a step or like skip the step completely, because of this company objective or this team objective. I think that's a really, really important thing.
Yeah.
um, and I think the same goes with obsessing with tools, with specific tools. And I think that again goes back to the process. And I think, the design industry was definitely very tool focused. It still is. There's definitely a lot of worship and obsession with tools.
Hmm.
I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon. But I think with this, at the speed of which everything is developing nowadays, it's very likely that the tools that you're using today are going to be different tomorrow. So being able to be more tool agnostic, not spend too much time just overly mastering one specific thing because it's likely that that tool is going to be
Hmm.
different, and focusing on workflows, focusing on thinking, focusing on the things that are really kind of like tool agnostic. I think
Hmm.
that's something that will really benefit designers. But yeah, really
Yeah.
curious to hear your thoughts on this. I'm sure everyone will have a very different opinion.
No, I think this is very good regarding the processes. Looking back at my experience, only the very last company, it was American, um, B2B mortgage, big, quite big company, and we tried to follow the process, like the proper process, and only because the CEO was obsessed with, and he was giving a lot of power to designers, and even on the later on at the PM level, they were kind of pushing back on this, okay, let's just give it to us. So in my entire career, I haven't seen the proper double diamond ever. So it's good to understand it, but yeah, just I agree with you here. Just be flexible, know the theory about it, know how it works, know why, etc. But yeah, just be flexible about it and not obsess. I think it's a very, very good point you made. For the tools, yeah, I think like I had more point for the tools, and I agree with you here. um, I had more about the AIs also,
Mhm.
because I treat AI as a tool. So there is this obsession with AI. I think it correlates a little bit with your notion that, hey, there are so many tools going to be developed, and you can see that like there is so many like animation tool, this tool, that tool, and you will be buried under this noise if you try to chase everything. Just okay, design, but just pick Figma. Just don't do anything else for now, because it will cover 90% of your cases. I mean, I'm not advertising Figma by any means, but that's just the industry best tool right now. And yeah, I agree. I think like don't obsess too much with tools, and don't obsess too much with this, I would say, AI hype workflows. This is still, I would say, it's still really, really raw. Um, for design, and yeah, there are a lot of posts, and you might think that you're missing out. Like somebody posted, hey, this is such an amazing UI design I generated. Yeah, but did it go to production, and how did you, can you do some edits, this, etc. It is development, don't get me wrong, it will get better, but just like stay behind, like lean into the foundations and being tool agnostic. For example, I can give you an example from my own experiences. Like I was learning the animation with Adobe After Effects, and you learn
Sure.
the core principles, right? The timeline, the key points. Oh, sorry, no, with Flash. Sorry, I'm really old. So when you learn that, you open any animation tool, you can do the work there. You just,
Exactly.
so that's to your point. Yeah, just learn the foundation, learn the core, and don't over obsess with jumping around the tools. So yeah, I agree here with you.
Totally. And if I can add one small point, totally agree, by the way. I think you gave the
Mhm.
perfect example. As long as you're familiar with a timeline tool, you can
Yeah,
pretty much use, Rive, After Effects, Jitter, call it what you want.
exactly.
I think
Yeah,
it's the same with AI, right? Like with AI, I totally think people should be using AI almost on a daily basis. But I don't think anyone should get obsessed with, let's say, a specific LLM or a specific chat or a specific vibe coding tool, right? All you need to learn is, be familiar with a chat-based interface. Pick
yeah.
one that you want to use and just use it again and again. Pick any vibe coding tool and just like play around a bit. But don't become too obsessed, because a year from now, these tools are going to be very, very different.
Oh
And I
yes.
think AI is another example of this. Is learn the workflow, learn the output and the outcome you can get. Don't become overly passionate about the specific tool that you're using, because
Mhm.
you need to be more tool agnostic in today's era.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And we touched the elephant in the room, right? Everybody talking about AI, and we have this question as a follow-up planned, and I think we touched it a little bit, right? So, can you add anything more, like to that, like to that point? How designers need to think about AI in 2026, and what, to your opinion, separates simply, using AI from actually, working smarter and producing better results?
Yeah. Huge question. I'm still discovering this myself. I feel like a student again after many, many years. I'll tell you my thoughts. I think AI is here to stay, right? And the way that I see this industry is it's a very different industry than when I joined it. And I think we are all learning to design with AI and design for AI. In
Hmm.
terms of the things that are interesting to me from, 1 year of constant exploration, I think AI creates a lot of autonomy, right? It's one of the things that, again, to that concept of being a founding designer, I think AI creates a lot of autonomy
Hmm.
in teams that may not benefit from, let's say, having a research team and a content team and a production team. So being able to use AI to produce content, to produce text content, image content, video content, to refine the content
Hmm.
of your UX copy. I think all of those things can be done so simply. They're literally just like figuring out 5, 10 basic
Yeah.
prompts and can help any designer. That I think this is unbelievably important right now for any designer that wants to kind of like be very powerful in this new era. So autonomy for me is one thing. The second thing is speed, right? I think AI creates this tremendous opportunity for higher speed in companies or when freelancing. So I'll give you an example. Using AI to analyze, synthesize research, if you're a team that has no dedicated researchers, you can do the same, not that I'm letting not to say the same, but you can do like pretty good research, like interviews and analysis and synthesis at 1/10 of the time, just by
Hmm.
prompting, just by using any LLM out there. So these for me are kind of like the basics that I think every designer out there should be using, because they want to be more autonomous and because they want to ship faster, design faster, and get more insights. So I think that's one thing that is much more technical and functional.
Hmm.
There's another really basic thing for me, which is getting just better as a product person and developing your product sense just by using AI as a companion, as a coach, like a product coach. And I think
Hmm.
there's a lot of talk about this. In Lenny's newsletter, there's tons of great people talking about, building
Yeah.
product coaches with AI. I suggest people go out there, find some of these tutorials and lessons and prompt mechanics so that you can just have this coach where you can always ask, hey, what did I forget here? Like, can
Hmm.
you just break this down and roast this flow that I'm building? Or I'm thinking of this solution. Like, what is a different solution? And even though this sounds super simple, and it sounds simple because when you experiment with it, in 5 minutes, you'll get it.
Hmm.
It's so powerful because it is one thing that in the past, you would only build through, again, trial and error. And you
Yeah.
would ship something and be like, oh, we didn't think of this, right? Or a PM would say it. But nowadays, with constant friction with AI, I think you can become much, much better at this by having this
Yeah.
side like
Yeah.
companion that you always use for this type of work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the last thing, which is I think that for me is the biggest elephant in the room, and that's where you go away from just being smart about AI and you
Mhm.
really integrate AI into your workflow, is with prototyping and working directly in code.
Yeah.
And I think those are two things that I'm still exploring myself. So I don't have the perfect answer for this, but I think prototyping with AI is extremely powerful. It's not for everything. I wouldn't use it for every bit of prototyping that I do, but for things like complex interactions, if you're working in B2B and you want to create a
Hmm.
new workflow, I would just work directly in AI. I wouldn't even touch Figma prototyping. And I
Yeah.
think that's one big thing that I can clearly see a difference between teams that use it and teams that don't use it. And the last bit is kind of designers working directly in code. And
Hmm.
that's the thing that have touched the least. So I can't really speak out of experience. But the way that I see it, I think in a few years, the best designers out there in specific industries will be able to work directly in code and prototype
Yes.
directly in a code base. I'm not sure if you guys are experimenting at all at Uxcel with this, and I work in consumer products where this is a bit more difficult. But if you're in B2B,
Hmm.
I would bet really good money that
Yeah.
like the best designers will be working directly in code in a few years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my that's
I
my
think
overall.
I think that's the future. I think that's the future, 100%. Yeah, I think you outlined it all. Just to add to that, again, like I'm trying to always connect with the examples from my own experience. I remember discovering the Webflow, and the Webflow basically allowed you to be with some knowledge of code, because I know CSS, I knew CSS, I knew HTML and all this stuff. With some knowledge of code, you were able to kind of produce the designs. And even then, back then, I was seeing the opportunity to produce with fake screens the prototypes, which I can go and test for B2B. I tried to pitch this idea to back then to the management. They were like, hey, this is like very new and all this stuff. And now with the course and lately they just released the designer and the editor, the visual viewer, and everything. I cannot wait to get my hand around it, actually, to try it out. And we're actually going to be doing something for Uxcel. We actually going to be migrating a few things with the new structure. But yeah, it is exciting times. It will empower a lot of designers, I think. And you definitely don't rush to it. Don't don't try to join the hype. But yeah, those little meaningful workflows, join in, embrace yourself, embed yourself in all the learning channels you can get, and yeah, just start exploring. Again, back to the practice. Just go there and practice. And I think like my notion to this is AI is another tool, and tool for you as a designer is your medium between what you have in your head and what you want to produce on the screen. And back to the Sketch, the Photoshops, etc. The tools were harder, and you needed to navigate a lot of hustle to express your vision
Totally,
on the
totally.
paper, on the screen, basically. It became easy with the Sketch, it became easy with the Figma. If you are mastering the tool with the shortcuts, it became even easier. So the point here, the tool enables you to project your vision into the screen. AI is just another tool. And don't get caught into the tools, into the workflows, into this little things to the tool. That's not the point. It's not the point how to master. The point is the output, and the point to shorten the time and improve the quality of the picture somewhere in your head and what you want to put in the screen. And I think that AI here, if you treat it somehow like that, is a huge enabler for designers. Is a huge, and I think personally, I think designers are most empowered professionals compared, like if you look at the product triad, like product managers, engineers, and designers. I think designers with just a little bit of um, learning few cross-functional skills here and there, I think are the most empowered because we're thinking about the entire experience, and I think the AI is there to empower us like tremendously.
I couldn't agree more. I won't rehash what you said because I completely agree with every single bit that you said. The only bit I would call out is, I think 2026 will be the age of the builder. And I think, a builder nowadays doesn't have to be an engineer. A builder can be
Yeah,
any product person, actually even any non-product person can be a builder
yeah,
nowadays. And like you said, I think designers have this tremendous opportunity ahead of them to be builders. It doesn't mean that you have to be a solo builder. It doesn't mean everyone needs to found businesses. You can be a great builder in a company of a
yeah,
thousand, 10,000 people, or a company of one, right? But
yeah.
having that builder mindset of, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to use AI or X tool or X process to just build and test and develop empathy and develop taste. And like you said, and I love the way you portrayed it, like the thing that I have in my head, I just need to put out there, whether I vibe code it or prototype it or use any tool to put
Exactly.
it out there. I think that's the most important lesson for someone today. So yeah, like think like a builder, basically. I think 2026 will be the age of the builder.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. All right, I think I'll have my last question. I think Sophia gonna jump in soon because we are a little bit taking a bit too much time that we planned, but I think the conversation is going well. All right, so Filippos, the last one from me is so looking back at the start of your career, pick one thing that you wish you understood earlier, or maybe took another path or something like that.
Yeah. So I think going back to that previous conversation, if I were to summarize it, I think it took me a very long time to work with live products that had real customers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because early on I worked with a B2B startup that had no live product yet, and we were just concepting and doing all of these pitch kind of work pieces. And then I did a bit of freelancing. I think it was only when I worked in a consumer product of thousands then millions of customers that I really got what UX was. And I'm not saying you need to work in a consumer product, it can be B2B, but I think having that early exposure into a live product,
Mm-hmm.
that completely changes your mindset. And I think for me, that was my only grab with freelancing. That freelancing was often kind of, you need to design this thing, just deliver it, and you have no feedback,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I think when I 4 years into my career, when I started, designing and developing consumer products, there was so much feedback, and a lot of those concepts and hypotheses were completely invalidated in
Mm-hmm.
hours or days. And that changed me completely as a designer. And that's when I completely shifted my mindset to not just designing for the sake of design, but designing because there is a company objective that needs to be
Mm-hmm.
achieved, and there is a consumer or individual objective or user objective that also needs to be met. And I think as much as you read the theory on this, and you do concepts and mock work and courses, you don't realize this
Yeah.
until you work with a product where you have a direct access to the customer, whether
Yeah.
that's a business customer or individual consumer.
Yeah. This is extremely, extremely important, I would say. And from my point, I want to add is UX design, product design is never solo. And from my own experience, I haven't. I spent a bit too much time working solo as a freelancer. Treating design mostly as a tasks and not making it two-way conversation. And I think the earlier you treat design as a two-way conversation, like, hey, it's not just a task. You need to question what you're doing. You don't assume that they know what need to be done. And I think because the nature how I started, I mean, it was the freelance. You basically you are given the task list basically, and you treat it like that. But then I was like, okay, that's not what something is missing. And basically, yeah, UX design is never so. I think you need to learn effective collaboration early on, and yeah, that it will help you tremendously in the career, and especially for the product designer. It's not just a pushing pixels and creating prototypes. It's talking with the engineers, making trade-offs, talking with product managers, advocating your decision, presenting, and so on and so forth. There are so many things, and the better you can pitch, the better you can explain, and the better you can question things. I think the better you will be off as a professional.
Totally agreed. Couldn't agree more. Very well said.
Awesome. All right. So yeah, Filippos, thanks. Sofia, hey.
Hello, hello. Thank you. I'm jumping into not to be a party pooper, but we have some allocated time for the Q&A, and we have plenty of questions. So I will do my best to pick out a few, and yeah, let's get started. If anyone hasn't posted their questions yet, feel free to do it now. I'll be going through them, and we'll try our best to cover as much as possible. So treat this, Filippos and Gene, as like fireside questions. Like
All right.
we're gonna do a quick one. So um, the first one is coming from LinkedIn, actually, and it's about AI. So as AI is going through a lot of changes, getting better and at an unbelievable rate, what's the changes AI will make in your process that you think will happen in 2026?
I can share my quick thoughts on this and would love to hear Gene's thoughts. So we kind of touched on it already. I think for me, especially when it comes to, let's say, research or ideation or defining a problem, that's where AI can very simply like overhaul your entire process, because from doing the work manually, you just use any LLM out there, pick one that you like, one that you enjoy the results, come up with a list of prompts that you find useful, help me analyze this piece, help me define this problem, help me define the edge cases, help me ideate on some solutions. Is the solution okay? Just by having the right prompts, AI can really accelerate that process. And then I think when it comes to design, for me, with design specifically, I think design is the only part of the process that right now isn't solved with AI. I think that's the one thing that AI can do an okay job at, but not an amazing job at. But prototyping, I think every designer should be experimenting, prototyping and testing with AI rather than just prototyping in, traditional Figma and, mockups, because I think that can really change how much of a, high fidelity result you can get. And I think using that and testing that with customers or even internally can be a very big change.
Yeah.
Gene, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. And add, I think it will free up you from the tasks which you didn't like to do. And for example, documentation for me was always not fun. Or analyzing the research, you can do it so much faster with AI, and probably even sometimes deeper. With AI. So I think like just to add into that, it will empower you to enjoy your work and do the more meaningful work a bit more time, I would say.
Thank you. So somewhat related to that, but more going into career side. If I want to be a hybrid between a UX UI designer and a front end developer, what languages do you think I should focus on?
All right. Let me start this time. Probably it's hard to answer. I think, React is the most popular one. It's the one that I think a lot of great modern tools are being built right now. And honestly, I don't have like exact answer because I'm not engineer. You understand the core concepts like in the question, right? HTML, etc. When you understand the core concepts, it can get you already pretty far. And yeah, just pick one or two. I think like React or something like that. For if you talk about front end, probably this is the best choice. But I wouldn't say I'm the expert here.
The one thing that I would add to this also is I completely agree with what Gene said. I think getting the fundamentals right and starting with something like React, which now powers most of modern internet, right? I think is a good starting point. I think a few years in, it's good to make a decision on whether you want to go, let's say, mobile first or web first.
Yeah.
So do you want to start specializing in something like React Native or Flutter if you want to build hybrid apps?
Yeah.
Do you want to specialize more in native mobile, like with Swift? I think that is a decision that, again, I'm not an engineer anymore that I can answer, but I do know from working with engineers that that specialization does become important at some point in time. So having a think about, do I enjoy building stuff on the web? Do I enjoy building hybrid things on mobile on the web? Or do I enjoy building mobile things? I think that is a separation that, particularly in engineering, becomes quite important as we become more senior, because then people will come looking for, let's say, React people or React Native people or Flutter people or Swift people or Android people and so on. But yeah, for me, hybrid all the way, for sure, that's the best way to start from. But at some point, pick between, let's say, mobile versus web-based.
Thank you. So going from a loaded question to one might be a better one. How do we align skill expansion with compensation growth? Basically, so that the company sees this as a sustainable investment in both the role and the person.
All right. Filippos, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go. I think it's an interesting one. I don't think skill expansion is super relevant to compensation growth, if I'm being honest. At least the way that I would hire or the way that I would compensate people wouldn't be depending on skill. It'd be more dependent on outcome. So the way that I would see it is, if you're having conversations about compensation growth, I don't think, to me at least, it doesn't have to do with, oh, I'll learn these things, so pay me more. For me, it's, I'll do these things. I'll provide this outcome for the business, so I need to be better compensated. So if as part of this answer, that is that I need to expand my skill set to learn AI or vibe coding or something else, I think that's fine. But it's like Gene was saying before, that's just the tool, that's just the process
Yeah.
you're using to get there. Compensation growth usually comes by looking at someone and saying, this person brings us a lot of leverage. This person brings us a lot of outcome. This person provides the outcome or the output of 2-3 people. So find what that leverage is, right? Is it that I'm going to be faster? Is it that I'm going to produce better results? Is it that I'm going to do the job of a person that you would otherwise need to hire because of that expansion and because of using AI, and use that as your leverage for compensation growth?
Yeah, 100% agree here. And just to add, is probably, it's not only about the skill expansion. It's Filippos, like you said, like do that and all this stuff. But you need to show that it was actually done. You need to, because I've seen so many people, very skilled people, or they are outgrown their roles just because they didn't know how to present themselves. They didn't know how to go and pitch that and everything. So I think that's the trade-off. You don't focus. It's not about focusing just solely on skill growth. It's focusing on showing the work that was done and the results that were produced, because the results is something that is more close to the company, right? More close to the business language. So the ability not only focus on just the skill growth, but also kind of communicating and showing that, hey, this is actually what brought improvements to the product, to the process, to the team collaboration, whatever, right? And this is how we build. I believe, this helped the company. That's how I would say you would be in a much better position to communicate. Hey, I need to get my compensation up or something like that. I don't know if this question came from the company perspective or individual perspective looking at it now, but I hope we covered both.
I believe you did. But that being said, that is all the time we have left for today. We're running a little bit out of it. So I wanted to take a quick second to thank both you, Filippos and Gene, for joining us today. I had a lovely time listening to you to discuss, what are the top skills in 2026 for product designers, also your perspective on how the industry will change. So Everyone else, I hope you also enjoyed, and thank you for staying until the very end. Really, the Q&A is what makes this a great session, with everyone chiming in with their own stories, so thank you. um, Before we wrap up, I'd love to give you to the moment to share any final thoughts, or any shout outs you want to do. Now is the time.
Filippos, you want to go?
I have no particular thing to shout out or leave our audience with is, if you ask me, what do I think of the next year? As I said before, I feel like a student again. So if I'm starting from scratch, a junior designer is also starting from scratch. So I think there's an incredible opportunity for people now that are designers to rethink how they operate, to think like builders, to go out and take their ideas out and put them out there. I'm not saying it's easy, right? I'm not saying the design market is easy. It definitely isn't, but I think the opportunity is unparalleled. So I think if you leave this conversation and you're thinking, what should I do next? Like, don't forget, like if you're junior, you still need to like go through the basics, right? You still need to like cover all that fundamental knowledge that Gene also was mentioning before. AI is here to stay. Treat AI like a daily jog. I like to use that metaphor. Every day, spend a bit of time familiarizing yourself. We're all in the same boat. No one knows. No one has a clue on what they're doing, right? So just understand that and don't get absorbed by the hype and Figma is dead and design is dead and everything is dead and you should quit your jobs. Everyone's on the same boat. Everything you're hearing is just like fear mongering and clickbait. Just get familiar with it. Just a daily jog. Every week try something new, try a different workflow, and that's actually going to really help you stand out in a market where everyone's really starting from scratch. So yeah, I think 2026 is going to be a great year. I couldn't be more excited.
Yeah, cannot agree more, Filippos. I think daily jog is exactly the point I'm trying to also push to the community is we are all students, and you need the best habit you can adopt is the continuous learning. You need to always learn. Just take 30 minutes, an hour a day, explore something, and keep learning, and you'll be in a much better shape. Because the it's not like the path is not like 0 to 1 and that's it. You continue to grow, and like you said, we're all in the same boat. Everything is changing around, and we just need to adapt. So yeah, just for some things, just observe from the side and decide when to act, like all this AI hype. Now from other things, you still have some core and foundational skills to always continue to develop. So don't forget about that, and continue learning, always continue growing. So yeah, Philippos, again, thank you so much for joining the call. I think it was an amazing conversation, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it really, really much.
Thank you for having me. I had the best time. I was all really insightful. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We'll be sending out the recording very shortly, so keep an eye on your inbox. And until next time, keep on learning, stay intentional about where you are putting in your growth, and we'll see you in the next session.